The video clip you are watching was not seen by the NTSB when they did their investigation of the Cameron Airshow crash of Steve Oberg. For pilots who are watching this detailed interactive video includes additional information that will allow you to make your own assessment and hopefully come away with knowledge that may prevent this tragedy from happening to you, whether you're flying general aviation or performing aerobatics. Hi, I'm Don Kundiger. I appreciate your interest and hope that what you discover in this video will be of value. Before we get into this evaluation, please attend this short briefing. This interactive evaluation video may be unlike any other crash evaluation video you've ever seen for the following reasons. You're invited to be a part of the evaluation team. This video will show you what took place, plus include additional investigative materials. Although I will comment on possible causes at the end, this is your chance to assess what happened as you see it. In that light, this video exposes possible causes but doesn't claim probable causes. You will be able to use your expertise in making that determination. Other than air shows, most accident evaluation videos show no on-site videos of the crash or what led up to it. In evaluations that include a video of the crash, there are no similar flights to compare. In this video, you will see both side by side. And fourth, judging from the NTSB report, you will have more information than they investigated when they determined probable cause. So grab a pen and paper and prepare to make notes for your evaluation. To keep this video from getting too lengthy, occasionally you may need to pause the video and read printed materials because they will be on the screen too short for normal reading. In the comment section below this video, please detail your evaluation with recommendations that may help prevent a reoccurrence. Here is a list of the information we will cover. Compare side by side Friday's practice session with Saturday's air show. Wind direction, stall, and altitude. Fuel starvation and engine failure. Control surfaces, watching the Lomcevak maneuver in slow motion and zoomed in. Medications and disorientation. Pilot experience. NTSB evaluation. Additional information. My observations and recommendations. We will start this evaluation with a sequence of 10 maneuvers. Here we see Steve's maneuver sequence diagram in his cockpit. This is normal practice as seen in these photos from other Pitt's aerobatic planes. Because the Friday and Saturday performances were not identical in a straight timeline, at first I thought perhaps Steve experienced confusion as to where he was in the performance when he initiated the fatal Lomcevak. To find out, I listed the sequence of maneuvers of the two performances. Then I matched the maneuvers on a second list and discovered that the maneuvers were flown in sequence. However, we will see at the end that going from the whiffer transition into a knife oddly mirrored either going into the Lomcevak or to the video pass. We will now see a comparison between the Friday and Saturday performances, but edited to show each maneuver side by side. You will notice places where the speed has been adjusted, usually during transitions. This is so the maneuvers could be matched up. Steve took off heading south from runway 17 on Friday at 6:08 p.m. and heading north on runway 35 on Saturday at 1:40 p.m. Wind was out of the north both days. At the top of the screen, you'll see the number and the name of each maneuver written in blue, coupled with a glance at the maneuver diagram card Steve posted on his control panel. When you see the name in red, that is a deviation from the diagram card. For some reason, Steve listed the Lomcevak maneuver twice, as his 4th maneuver and again as his 9th maneuver. At this point, Steve deviated from his maneuver sequence and in both performances eliminated performing a Lomcevak as his 4th maneuver. This added to my initial confusion regarding whether both performances were the same. On the maneuver chart, the Lomcevak diagram is from right to left, but written under it is Lomcevak to knife. Oddly, a 45-degree knife is normally performed going into the Lomcevak, not coming out of it. Although Steve didn't perform the Lomcevak, this apparently is the knife he would have flown after it. Maneuver 6 is another knife edge with 2 rolls. Steve only performs 1 roll both days, but now I'm getting confused with similar maneuvers. Maneuver 7 Steve called a Malaroid. I could find no mention of a Malaroid maneuver in the Airshow charts, so I don't know if he created this maneuver or just named it like he did the chopper pass. Notice that he exits in opposite directions. Since he always came back to continue his show in the directions that were on his maneuver chart, he had to do a correction on Friday. Once again, this required editing to match the maneuvers of the 2 days. Notice that after Friday's chopper pass, Steve did not lose much altitude before going into an unscheduled inverted loop, which gained additional altitude. Conversely, on Saturday he lost considerably more altitude in a much longer descent, and then performed the planned whiffer transition where he gained some altitude but then came back down to the lower altitude where he had finished his descent from the chopper pass. This meant he was considerably lower when initiating the Lomcevak on Saturday. We will see the Lomcevak again in slow motion as well as zoomed in later in this evaluation.
The level 4 statement of aerobatic competency from the FAA and had his debut airshow performance at the famous Instrument Flight Instructor Certificate. He holds a level 4 statement of aerobatic competency from the FAA and had his debut airshow performance at the famous Airshow in 2014. 1 year later, here he is again. Wonderful job on his part. Airshow in 2014. 1 year later, here he is again. Wonderful job on his part.
In Friday's practice on the left, we now see Steve's final maneuver, a Humpty spin, before going into a whiffer transition like he did after the chopper pass on Saturday. Here we see the whiffer transition maneuver going into the knife maneuver that Steve designated as his video pass. Notice that this is the exact same sequence, whiffer to knife, at a low altitude as he had just used going into Lomcevak on Saturday. As you can see, this added to my initial confusion when at the air show, since I thought Steve had finished his performance and after the knife maneuver would land. Hence my shock when he went into the Lomcevak at such a low altitude. At the air show, I was surprised when Steve entered the fateful Lomcevak. Although I had never seen his 10-maneuver chart, my subconscious must have remembered how he finished his show the previous afternoon. Until I compared the 2 performance videos side by side, I had assumed Steve had forgotten to do the Lomcevak and impulsively went into it while flying his video pass in preparation to land. The next 2 videos show why I was mistaken. In this video, on both sides, we see Steve perform a whiffer transition maneuver, which is a sweeping turn when reversing direction before going into the knife maneuver. However, on the left, he is flying a knife video pass before landing, while on the right, he goes into a knife but then attempts a Lomcevak. Two identical knife maneuvers with two different outcomes. I failed to notice that the maneuver before the whiffer was different in the two flights. On the left, he was performing his 10th maneuver, a Humpty spin, and on the right, he was performing his 8th maneuver, chopper pass. In this second video, we see the second reason I was thrown off. After performing the chopper pass on Friday, Steve went into a half loop that gained considerable altitude before going into the knife, followed by the Lomcevak. On the right, we see Steve go into the whiffer maneuver, where he initially gains a bit of altitude, but then he swoops back down to his starting altitude, leaving him hundreds of feet lower to the ground on Saturday than when he looped on Friday. Why Steve half-looped on Friday, who knows? His maneuver chart shows to fly a whiffer before the Lomcevak. In hindsight, it would have been better to always fly the half-loop, as it would have given him the extra altitude he needed to recover after the Lomcevak. Some commented that Steve flew too many maneuvers. His routine was 10 maneuvers. From looking at routines flown by other aerobatic pilots, 10 maneuvers does not appear excessive. It is easy to compare Steve's routine to other routines by looking at YouTube aerobatic flight videos. When performing in aerobatic competition, the rules require that pilots stay inside the aerobatic box, an area that is 3,300 feet long by 3,300 feet wide, with a maximum altitude of 3,500 feet. The elevation of the bottom of the box depends on the pilot's aerobatic experience level. Here is an approximation of that box relative to the Cameron Airport. One other consideration is Steve's position relative to the spectators at the time he initiated the Lomcevak. Although he wasn't performing in aerobatic competition, he had passed the center point and was heading away from the spectators. It may be possible that a concern about flying too far away caused him to momentarily lose his awareness of his altitude, and he initiated the Lomcevak maneuver. Let's look at wind direction, stall, and altitude. Steve was flying downwind when he attempted the Lomcevak maneuver. The Lomcevak maneuver is a maneuver that cancels all lift on the wings until it's recovered. As experienced pilots know, as little as 5 miles an hour can make a difference whether you have lift or not. The NTSB report shows that the wind was variable at 5 knots at the Kansas City International Airport, 33 miles away. From this windsock, what do you determine the wind to be at the Cameron Airport? Several comments made by pilots who viewed the original video mentioned initiating the Lomcevak while flying downwind. You can pause the video and read their comments here. As noted in this FAA warning about preventing aerodynamic stalls at low altitude, it states, an aerodynamic stall can happen at any speed, at any altitude, and with any engine power setting. There were so many low-altitude comments, I'm unable to show all of them, but here are a few. You can pause the video and read them if interested. Initiating the Lomcevak at too low an altitude has been a major factor and is stated in the NTSB report. It is estimated that Steve went into the Lomcevak at 600 feet, and that it appeared that he would have recovered if he hadn't run out of airspace. Since Steve was in a stall spin, let's listen to what Dan Gryder of the Probable Cause YouTube channel has to say about recovering from this type of loss of control. You'll find a web link to Dan Gryder's Probable Cause YouTube channel in the description box below this video.
Remember, you can't spin it unless you stall it first. You can't stall it unless you exceed the critical angle of attack and get this thing going too slow. At 1,000 feet, there is no spin recovery technique that's going to work for you. You're going to get a full turn, and your spin recovery technique is futile below 1,000 feet.
Now let's evaluate whether there was fuel starvation or engine failure. Many who watched the original tribute video felt the plane ran out of fuel. Here are some of the comments. Once again, you'll need to pause the video if you wish to read them. The fuel starvation conclusion came from 3 observations: intermittent lack of sound from the engine, lack of regaining power, and lack of fire upon impact. If you listen closely, it sounds like Steve attempted to add throttle in the rotation before the attempt where the white show smoke bursts out. Now let's compare the 2 Lomcevak maneuvers when power is applied. While recognizing Steve was low and slow when he started the Lomcevak, and regardless of the fact that bursts of power are used to recover from a spin, the strong response to the throttle in the practice session compared to the lack of response and failed sustainability of increased fuel to the engine causes me to suspect a fuel delivery problem. Power was not regained as I would have anticipated when Steve opened the throttle and the show smoke reappeared. Unfortunately, the NTSB investigation never mentioned fuel in their report. They stated some concern with loose bolts on the fuel pump, but reported the pump was severely damaged upon impact and assumed it was working properly. Unfortunately, they never mentioned investigating the fuel tank or fuel system. The NTSB could have easily done the following: checked airport records that showed how much fuel Steve purchased on Friday evening, checked airport records to see if he purchased additional fuel on Saturday, check how long the plane had flown after receiving fuel, even though aerobatic maneuvers at full power don't correlate with normal flight fuel usage. And they could have checked the fuel tank to see how much usable fuel remained. None of this was done. The absence of sound can be attributed to 3 possibilities: the direction of the exhaust changing during the Lomcevak maneuver, reducing or increasing the power depending on the aircraft's attitude while attempting a recovery, and Steve had changed the Pitt's stock 2-bladed propeller to a 3-bladed prop that created additional sound. The sound from this propeller varies depending on the engine's RPM. In addition, we don't know whether Steve's Pitt's fuel system had a header tank. As shown in these schematic drawings, not all Pitt's aircraft had a header tank. I obtained these drawings online from a Pitt's owner who wanted to add a header tank to his fuel system. Although some Pitt's control panels include an electric fuel gauge, Steve's control panel doesn't appear to have one, and the only way of determining the fuel level would be from looking at the sight gauge tube. You may wish to pause the video and read what one experienced Pitt's pilot has to say about the accuracy of the sight gauge tube. Had there been fuel in the tank, a fire would seem highly likely, as seen in these airshow accidents with similar aircraft. Had the NTSB reported whether the fuel tank and system were still intact, the tank was not ruptured, and whether there was still fuel in the tank, their report would have been more thorough. To determine whether fuel starvation occurred requires additional information that is no longer available. You are welcome to express your opinion in the comments section. Some people who saw the Steve Oberg tribute video thought the engine failed. Several people commented they saw bright flashes from the engine indicating an engine problem. These flashes were actually reflections from the sun, which was directly overhead. The reflections aren't as pronounced in the Friday photos because it was after 5 p.m. and Steve's crash on Saturday was around 1:51 p.m. Other witnesses said they saw black smoke. Here is a series of photos clipped from the video that show darker smoke. From my observations, this occurred all during the performance and was due to shadowing from the sun. What do you think? The engine was shipped to the manufacturer for examination, and the engine passed all points within the prescribed limits of the engine run. The video recordings indicate the engine was operating throughout the flight to ground impact. We can therefore assume there was no engine failure. However, this doesn't address fuel starvation, and nowhere in their report is fuel mentioned. In addition, the engine seemed to lack power when Steve added throttle when attempting to recover from the Lomcevak maneuver. Here we see a slight increase in propeller rotation, but it slows almost immediately. The propeller speed increases as Steve applies power for a second time. The increase in propeller speed is much more pronounced, as indicated by the stop rotation of the propeller in relation to the video frame rate. Now we see the propeller rotation again as it slows. But the propeller is always spinning, and there is no indication that the engine failed or stopped. Control surfaces watching the Lomcevak maneuver in slow motion and zoomed in. According to the NTSB evaluation, there was no indication of problems with the controls. Several people who viewed the original video commented about the position of the control surfaces. In that video, the plane was so far away, I was unable to observe control surface changes accurately. Therefore, I made this zoomed-in video clip in slow motion so you can better see the control surface changes. You will notice that Steve starts the maneuver by rolling to the left. According to this comment, the maneuver works better when initiated by rolling right. Here is Steve's attempt at the Lomcevak maneuver, zoomed in and in slow motion. At this point, the control surfaces appear to be in the neutral position. The ailerons are now correcting to stop the roll. Approaching passing through a level attitude, the control surfaces are neutral again. The plane has flipped to inverted with loss of control, with control surfaces neutral. It appears that the controls are going into flipping the plane to the left to try to stop the roll. Back again to neutral with the rudder to the right. At the level position, power is briefly increased, and ailerons are positioned to flip the plane to the left again. back to neutral. Trying to correct to the left again, right rudder. Neutral with right rudder. Contact with the earth. Medications and disorientation. Another possible cause that was raised by viewers of the Steve Oberg tribute video was disorientation due to G-forces and or a medical condition. Some felt he may have lost consciousness. One person suggested a study should be made on how G-forces affect a pilot. Actually, this was done back in 1984, and the results are in the FAA Advisory Circular number 91-61. In the description box below, I put a link where you can download this circular in PDF form. Per this study, the average pilot was unconscious for 15 seconds and for 20 to 30 seconds not in control of the aircraft. Accelerating at 1 G per second, most pilots will gray out in 4.1 seconds and black out at 4.7 seconds. Some pilots are more sensitive and experience problems sooner. An outside-inside vertical V8 was deemed to be the most physiological demanding experience, plus 5 Gs to minus 5 Gs in only 5 seconds. Changes in vision and loss of consciousness are possibilities. Whether G-forces may have affected Steve Oberg, we will never know, but it is obvious that he was attempting to fly his aircraft the entire time. This outside vertical loop was earlier in his Saturday performance after his third maneuver, a Humpty spin. But adding up the G-forces he experienced throughout the show, it may have had some cumulative effect on judgment. In another comment from Charles Foster, he noted how Steve was very aggressive with the whiffer transition prior to attempting the Lomcevak. Charles attributed it to adrenaline, though he didn't say that specifically. Notice how Steve aggressively snapped into a left bank to enter the whiffer transition. Also notice on Friday how wide and sweeping he performed the same maneuver. In fact, I had to speed up Friday's video so I could match up the next maneuvers. Charles may have been onto something in his assessment. Besides G-forces, could medications possibly have had some negative effect? Steve's toxicology report revealed the following: fexofenadine, sold as Allegra, ibuprofen, and azaclinol. The NTSB report states no evidence of any medical condition or substance that would have contributed to the pilot's loss of control during performance of aerobatic maneuvers. They also stated that fexofenadine is a non-sedating antihistamine. Of course, Allegra's webpage confirms this. However, I looked up fexofenadine on drugs.com. I found the following. You have to scroll down the web page to find this information, but although uncommon, there are possible side effects. Azaclinol appears to be part of the makeup of fexofenadine, according to another web page. You'll find links to all of this information in the description box below the video. I'll end this section on medications and disorientation with a comment made by Brad A. regarding the NTSB report. He stated, also, maybe it's something to think about if you have to take decongestants and azaclinol, a sedative, and fexofenadine and ibuprofen to get ready to fly. Maybe you shouldn't be flying aerobatics. Food for thought. Pilot experience. Although Steve, a highly experienced professional pilot, had logged over 11,000 hours of total flight time in various aircraft, including helicopters and jet fighters, he only owned the pits for 2 years, logging about 200 hours. How many of those hours were spent practicing or performing aerobatics, we do not know. But 200 hours should be plenty of time to become proficient with a particular aircraft in regular flight. According to the maintenance records, the Pitts flew 55.4 hours from April 2014 to May 2015, with 13 additional hours from the time of inspection until the time of the crash. There is no mention in the NTSB report indicating how many of those hours were spent flying aerobatics or whether Mr. Oberg had flown any other air shows between his debut aerobatic performance at the Cameron Airport a year earlier in 2014 and when he crashed in 2015.
He holds a Level 4 Statement of Aerobatic Competency from the FAA and had his debut airshow performance at the famous Cameron Airshow in 2014. 1 year later, here he is again, doing a wonderful job.
In sports, the first year is considered the rookie year. In essence, Mr. Oberg's performance at the 2015 Airshow in Cameron, Missouri was his graduation out of rookie status. From testimony in the NTSB report made by other aerobatic pilots at the Cameron Airshow, Steve's attempt at the Lomcevak was started too slow, too low in altitude, at a 30-degree angle of climb instead of a 45-degree, and he also entered the maneuver rotating left instead of right. According to the aerobatic maneuver identification of a Lomcevak from Fighter Combat International, all those characteristics are verified, with the addition that the exit is supposed to be in the opposite direction. Steve didn't exit in the opposite direction on Friday, and both days, perhaps due to rotating to the left, the maneuver he performed didn't really match a real Lomcevak. Also, Fighter Combat International states that the Lomcevak is a maneuver in the advanced category. Steve was obviously a very advanced pilot with a total of over 11,000 hours in a variety of aircraft. However, the term advanced, when used in describing the Lomcevak, would be interpreted as a maneuver for an advanced aerobatic pilot, not an advanced pilot in general. NTSB evaluation. When I posted the original Steve Oberg tribute video, I never anticipated the hundreds of comments from viewers who wondered why such a highly experienced pilot crashed. In attempting to answer their question, I replied by giving them a link to the NTSB report. However, I felt the NTSB investigation failed to answer their question and fell short of the NTSB mission statement. Their conclusion in this Cameron Airshow accident was more of a report telling what happened, but not why it happened. It's obvious the Lomcevak was entered at too low an altitude, but why? What good is it stating the obvious if we don't learn why it happened, plus get recommendations to help prevent it from happening to others? The purpose of an NTSB investigation is to determine why it happened and to make recommendations that may help prevent a similar occurrence. They made no recommendations. Here is the NTSB promo video where they state that making recommendations is their purpose.
Our effectiveness is grounded in our reputation for conducting thorough, accurate, and independent investigations. We produce timely, well-considered recommendations to enhance transportation safety. This is our mission. We are the NTSB.
Notice they say to enhance transportation safety. I may be way off base, but since the NTSB is mainly concerned with transportation safety, I wonder if they put less concern in evaluating a performance flight crash versus the transportation crash like that of an airliner. Nevertheless, that doesn't explain their lack of recommendations regarding general aviation crashes. Once again, here's Dan Gryder from the Probable Cause YouTube channel with facts about the NTSB and their lack of recommendations in the 32 months following January 1st of 2020.
2020, there's been 3,094 general aviation accidents. That includes Part 135, Part 137, which is Ag, and Part 91. 3,094 of them. There's been 539 fatal accidents in those three categories alone. Part 91 makes up the bulk of it. 539 fatal accidents. Out of that, how many recommendations has the NTSB made? Remember, the job of the NTSB is to investigate, produce a probable cause, and a recommendation. They go hand in hand. Producing a probable cause is only 10% of the battle. 90% of it is producing a recommendation that will prevent its further reoccurrence in the future. Is the NTSB doing their job? No. Since January 1, 2020, there's been 3,094 of these. How many recommendations have they produced? 4. All 4 of them were for the Kobe Bryant crash. They issued 4 recommendations for Kobe. Nobody else got any. And it's a crying shame. They're not actually doing their job, and I don't appreciate that.
And by coincidence, today, while I was creating the NTSB portion of this video, Dan was on the YouTube reporting on the NTSB recommendations of the last 11 years. Let's listen to Dan again.
I pulled up a little bit of data. Over the last 10 years, this is 10 years of NTSB data. Here's a shocking screen for you. In the last 10 years, there's been 11,252 general aviation accidents. 11,252. How many recommendations has the NTSB produced in that same 10 years? Well, the answer is only 15. Here's a screen grab to show you exactly what the NTSB's job is. They're supposed to be issuing a probable cause and issuing a recommendation for each accident. That's their job. It's not just one or the other. They're supposed to issue a probable cause and a recommendation. They're simply not doing it. Jennifer, I'm not very happy with you. Here she is. Jennifer, let's get with this. Let's give a recommendation for each accident. Even if it's the same thing. Even if your recommendation is you should use better, this pilot should have used better aeronautical decision making and should not have launched. That's still a recommendation. You can generalize your recommendations a little bit more. I think we should have a hand in hand. Every time there's a probable cause, there needs to be a recommendation. And even if it's the same thing over and over, keep recommending it. You're the NTSB. People are going to listen to what you say. Give us a recommendation on what this guy did so that we can know.
Now is your chance to do what the NTSB failed to do. Take what you learned from watching this video and help other pilots by stating your safety recommendations in the comment section below. Additional information. As this evaluation video comes to a close, remember to look in the description box below the video where you can click on web links to important useful safety information for all pilots, which include the FAA Advisory Circular 91-61 titled Effects of G-Forces on a Pilot, the Aviation 101 AQP AFR Supplement, ACE Manual, Requirements for Becoming an Aerobatic Pilot, as well as other information. Plus, I highly recommend visiting the YouTube aviation safety channels of Probable Cause by Dan Gryder, Blanco Lirio by Juan Brown, and Flywire by Scott Perdue. You will find these links below in the description box after the timeline for this video, where you can easily click on a time marker and go immediately to the specific topic in the video you wish to revisit. My observations and recommendations. Following are my takeaways from this tragedy. I'm not suggesting any of these specifically caused the accident, but they are my observations and my suggestions for safe flight. Please post your conclusions and safety recommendations in the comments section below this video, especially if you notice something that I missed. Most accidents are not caused by one element, but are the result of several factors. Steve's accident may have been a culmination of low altitude, low speed, low fuel, low aerobatic experience, choice of the Lomcevak maneuver, left entry into the Lomcevak maneuver, setting up the sequences of similar maneuvers, wind direction, antihistamine, and G-forces. How many of these elements add into the possible causes we may never know for sure. However, they are all worth considering and learning from. General aviation recommendations. Never fly an aircraft with just enough fuel that you feel should be good enough. Always carry enough fuel to reach an alternative airport should an emergency occur. Regardless of the purpose or duration of your flight, always start with a safety margin of extra fuel. If you think what you have will probably be good enough, it probably won't. Regardless of what over-the-counter or prescription medicines claim regarding side effects, strongly consider not piloting a plane if you need to take meds that may alter your ability to make quick, accurate decisions. Always consider wind speed and direction. Know the stall speed of the aircraft that you are flying and maintain a cushion against stalling. If performing aerobatics, never include similar maneuvers or transitions close together in a routine that may allow for confusion. Be sure the transition maneuver between AirSD show maneuvers always results in adequate altitude for your next AirSD maneuver plus a safety margin. I see no reason to perform the Lomcevak maneuver. It's not an exciting crowd pleaser like a hammerhead stall, a Humpty Bump, or a tail slide, and nobody really cares to see you perform it. It's not part of the AirSD aerobatic competition maneuvers and is inherently extremely dangerous. Reconsider performing a Lomcevak in an airshow performance. Even performing a 4-point roll better shows your flying expertise. If you fly aerobatics, the crowd has no idea what your maneuver schedule is. If you miss a maneuver or feel it is unsafe to perform it for any reason, skip it and no one will know or care. Whenever possible, plan your aerobatic maneuvers 3 mistakes high. Be sure to share your evaluation of this accident and any recommendations you have that may save lives. When expressing your evaluation in the comment section below, I ask that you please keep 2 things in mind. It's not about whether others agree or share your observations. Expressing your opinion about what you observe may help others see something that they missed. In that light, discuss and share your ideas, but please keep your comments civil. We all see things differently depending on our knowledge and experience, and differences of opinion may help us reevaluate our own conclusions. This video is about learning from your observations plus other pilots' comments about this tragic event to make us all safer aviators. In closing, I offer this tribute from Steve Oberg's obituary. Steve was a good person and a professional pilot whose life was cut way too short due to this tragic accident. I hope this video will give added value to his extensive aviation career by providing specific safety awareness and lessons learned that might prevent other pilots, perhaps you, from experiencing a similar fate. Observe, think, learn, and don't let your flying career end in an evaluation video. Thank you for participating. Please click the like button so YouTube's algorithms help other pilots to participate in this evaluation. Although my channel is not dedicated to aviation, please subscribe. I have uploaded other aviation videos you may enjoy watching, plus I will post more in the future. I wish you blue skies and tailwinds.